So hello and welcome to the HR Huddle. I'm Eloise Shelton of Vanilla Recruitment. We specialise in recruiting HR, marketing, office and accountancy roles. Today, we're joined by Andrea Ray from Inspiring Rewards and Graham and Sarah of Gateway HR. So we're going to discuss the cost of living crisis and how we can help our employees. So today's session will last approximately an hour. If you've got any questions as the session's running, please feel free to put them in the chat box and we'll get through as many as we can, or we can come back to you after the session. So we're going to start with Andrea sharing her thoughts and ideas with us for the first part of the session, and then Graham and Sarah have some information to share with us as well. And then we're also going to facilitate just an open discussion, because I think it'd be really nice to hear what everybody's doing, if you are doing anything for your employees already, so we can share ideas and best practice. So if that's all okay, then I'm going to pass over straight to Andrea to introduce herself and to kick off the meeting. So welcome, Andrea.
Thank you very much, Eloise. I'm just going to share my screen. Now, as you can possibly hear, I'm a little under the weather, and I do apologise for that my voice is going to be croaking probably through most of this, but I will do my very best to make it through what I wanted to say, because this is a really interesting topic to be talking about. So obviously today we're talking primarily about the cost of living crisis and how best to support employees. But I've actually entitled my presentation, Total Reward, a Time of Opportunity. And the reason for that is, there have been so many challenges over the last couple of years for organisations, for HR in particular. But one of the results of this, one of the things that's come about, is that organisations and management teams are suddenly interested in talking about reward. So in my experience, reward and investing in reward, benefits, pay structures, etc., has always been quite tricky to get on the table. It's a difficult business case to get through. But now suddenly management teams are interested. So for us as HR professionals, it's actually a great time of opportunity for us to come up with some really great creative solutions to get those in front of management teams. So what I'm going to cover today, excuse me, I'm going to talk a little bit generally about reward today and the current trends, opportunities and challenges, and one of which of course is the cost of living crisis, but there is also a lot else going on in the area of reward. I'll talk a little bit about then approaching that from a total reward perspective and where you might want to focus, what levers you might want to pull to focus on to address the challenges affecting your organisations. And then we'll do a bit of a deep dive on reward and the cost of living crisis. So very quickly, a little bit about me. So as Emily says, my name is Andrea Ray, and my organisation is Inspiring Reward. So I'm an independent reward consultant, but I am a little bit of a hybrid, because actually my career has been sort of half in compensation benefits and half in HR systems and people analytics. So very much on the technical side of HR. I work, excuse me, I work across the whole remit of reward, though it is quite broad. But these are probably the four main areas that I like to focus on the most with clients, where I feel I add the most value with my experience. The first being working with HR leaders and management teams on developing total reward strategy, and putting in place a roadmap and solutions to then deliver the reward interventions that are needed to drive and deliver that strategy. Also looking at technology solutions and process improvements in the area of reward. So everything from improving a pension and payrolls process that there's proper governance around it, through to some really funky spreadsheets, all the way through to running RFP processes for technology platforms. People analytics is another area that I really love working with. So everything from implementing reward metrics to gender pay gap analysis, and also communications and engagement. And I'm really passionate about this, because what I generally find is a lot of organisations already have quite good structures and products and solutions in place in the area of reward. But employees just don't simply know about them or don't understand them. So actually there's a lot that you can do to complement the investments you're making in reward in terms of engaging employees in what you already have and clearly communicating and keeping that communication going. Anyway, enough about me. Let's move on to the topic. So I wanted to start off by looking at some reward trends and some of the challenges in the reward space at the moment. As I said, it's been a fairly unprecedented couple of years generally, but particularly in reward. And actually, some of these trends were kind of bubbling away in the background a few years ago, but there's been a really accelerated focus primarily because of the pandemic. So firstly, there's quite a linkage now between reward and diversity, equity and inclusion. So we're seeing that on the one hand, of course, with pay gap analysis and policies to address pay gaps, but also in employees demanding more choice, flexibility and personalizations, and organizations recognizing that and responding to that. In fact, in their recent benefit attitude survey, Willis Towers Watson found that this was the #1 thing that employees wanted from their reward and benefits package, was choice and flexibility. Obviously, there's the increase in flexible hybrid and home working. I won't talk a lot about that, but it of course brings with it its own challenges from a reward and a pay perspective. Pay transparency and having a fair and consistent approach to pay is something that has come up more in what employees are demanding. And obviously we're now seeing that a lot in conversations about pay in the media as well. And here, I think a lot of organizations have been caught on the back foot because we're suddenly talking about pay budgets. And not all organizations actually have particularly good pay structures in place in the first place. And when we say pay transparency, we're not necessarily talking about developing pay bands and putting them up on the office wall or the factory wall. It's more about being transparent about how you set pay, how you make pay decisions, and employees understanding that it is a fair and consistent approach, because that it actually impacts on their engagement and motivation far more than necessarily the pay increase that you give them. There's also been generally a greater focus on communications and engagement around reward, particularly linked to organizational culture. So your employee value proposition, your values, your purpose, what you're doing around ESG, environment, social and governance. And then probably the area that has seen the biggest change is benefits. I mean, benefits historically has been quite an old-fashioned area of reward, very much status-based. Maybe give our senior managers a company car and private medical. This has seen some drastic change in the last few years, and organizations are really changing what they offer in terms of a benefits package. It's becoming a lot more democratized. So organizations are wanting to offer private medical to everybody, not just to management teams, for example. But also benefits have become much more focused on personal and financial well-being. And we'll talk a lot more about that later on, because this is a key area where you can support in the cost of living crisis. And there's also been a lot of new providers come on the market. I go to quite a lot of the Reward and Employee Benefits Association forums and meetings. Every time there is a new supplier there that I've not seen before, there's a lot happening in the area of benefits. Of course, add to this, there's also the challenges. We've got the Great Resignation. We've got huge challenges still with recruitment, which I'm sure Eloise knows far more than I do. And of course, the cost of living crisis, inflation, interest rates going up, a lot of challenges affecting reward. So how best to start tackling this? Because obviously we'll look at the cost of living crisis, but there's also more than that going on. Well, when I'm looking at reward strategy and how we tackle things affecting rewards in an organization, I like to look at it from a total reward point of view. Now, probably a lot of you are quite familiar with the concept of total reward. This particular model is the World at Work one. But in essence, what it's looking at is saying that you're developing your reward strategy, obviously driven by your business strategy, organizational culture, and your HR strategy, and very much influenced by external factors. So you may well be going back and reviewing your reward strategy right now to address some of the external issues that are going on that we've talked about. But when doing so, you're looking at all elements of reward, not just compensation. So compensation obviously a key element, but also benefits, well-being support, career and personal development, performance management, recognition, which I think is a hugely undervalued but a very, very impactful area of your reward toolkit. And also the work environment. So things like employee voice, to what extent can employees give their opinion surveys or engagement surveys? What's the line management culture like? What kind of flexible or home working do you offer? And your reward strategy is ultimately aiming to attract, motivate, and retain employees. and drive that engagement and satisfaction that ultimately then drives business performance and results, which is a bit of a two-way street, because if your business is performing well, that's also going to engage employees and give them more satisfaction. I actually like Michael Armstrong's definition of total reward the best. So he says that the total reward approach emphasizes the importance of treating and communicating every aspect of the rewards package when developing a reward strategy. The importance of getting pay right is recognized, and it is really important. I'll discuss that in a minute. But the basic premise of total reward is that there is more to reward.
I see, yeah. He's not very good at sharing.
So the importance of getting pay right is recognized, but the basic premise of total reward is that there's more to rewarding people than throwing money at them. I really like that last sentence. That's a particularly useful one to use with senior management teams, who might come to you saying, well, let's just give everybody a discretionary bonus and that will fix the problem. It may fix a problem, but not necessarily the problem that you have. So when you're looking at all the elements of total reward, I think this is quite helpful diagram to think then which are the best levers to pull, the best bits of your toolkit in total reward to address some of the issues you may be having. So for example, pay is talked about a huge amount at the moment, understandably. And base pay, absolutely, you have to get it right. And if you get it right, it will really help you attract the best talent and it will help retain your employees. But ultimately, it's not really the best tool to motivate and engage employees. If you've got it set at the right level, that's great. But if you want to really drive engagement, performance, productivity, base pay isn't actually one of the things that's going to really deliver on that. Whereas conversely, recognition, if that is rolled out successfully, whether that's informal or formal recognition schemes, and your line managers are really living and breathing a culture of recognition, that will do far more to motivate and engage employees and encourage them to feel that they'll feel valued, they'll feel that you're really recognizing what it is they're doing and feel more engaged to then deliver more. Short-term incentives, I put a little question mark there against the attract, just because if you offer some kind of bonus plan for a particular job and all your other competitors do as well, it's not going to have a massive amount of difference. Probably where short-term incentives would have an impact on how well you can attract talent is what you're doing compared to competitors. So if you're not offering a bonus plan, for example, for a particular role, and all your competitors are, then you're going to have to consider what other ways you're going to do to attract talent in. So that's a little bit about total reward and the different elements of that to address some of those challenges and trends that we've talked about. I'm now going to do a bit of a deep dive then on the cost of living support, which obviously is the topic of today's discussion. I'm going to look at that from three different angles. Firstly, compensation, so that we pay people in all its various forms. Then looking at benefits, and then looking at financial well-being support. So let's start with compensation. Very thorny issue at the moment, and the media does like to talk about this one. I would say that, like I said earlier, I think this one has also caught quite a few organisations in the back foot. And funny enough, I've had quite a few people contact me recently because their management teams are now finally interested in doing those pay structure projects that the HR team have been trying to do for a couple of years. Because the most important thing before we even talk about pay budgets is, have you got your pay levels and structures right? There's no point talking about whether you're going to give a 3, 4 or 5% pay increase if you're not sure whether you're actually paying people at the right level and that you have pay structures so that you know why you're paying the amount that you are for those jobs and how people's pay can progress as they move through the organisation, either through promotion or gaining skills and knowledge and so on. So it's really important to make sure you've got the pay structures right. That can be based on job levelling or just be based on pay itself. But you need to be making sure you are accurately benchmarking against the market. You're clear on what your market is. That might be national, might be local, might be industry specific. And that you're clear then on how the structures are going to work. And like I said, how employees' pay can move within those, because this ultimately then feeds into then how you're going to manage your pay budget and into making employees understand what you're doing around pay and how you're making pay decisions. So when it comes to the pay budget, There's quite a lot of numbers being thrown around at the moment. These are the ones from World at Work in their survey from July, so probably a little out of date now. But ultimately, the main point is we are not going to see salary budgets that are the same as inflation. There's a number of reasons for that. You're probably having conversations with employees about this right now, or certainly with managers when you're thinking about setting pay budgets for next year. Some of those would be, for example, there's obviously a time lag between when pay budgets are set and when we actually then do the pay awards. You were probably discussing pay budgets this time last year to then do maybe an April salary increase. So there's quite a big time lag between when the organisation sets the budget and when you're actually implementing those pay increases. Also, pay is a long-term investment. Every time you increase pay, you are adding to the costs of the business, whereas inflation is a short-term measure. So, the organisation can't keep adding 11% onto the pay budget. It's simply not affordable. Also, pay and the cost of goods are not the same thing. What we earn as our pay is not necessarily the same thing as what we are paying out. So obviously inflation is based on that basket of goods. That's not necessarily the same as what you're not necessarily paying out the same that you're earning. And we also don't know what people's individual circumstances are. You've also got savings and borrowing to take into account. And then obviously pay is also very much influenced by the market and the market for different skills and so on. So there's a lot of reasons why pay and inflation are not the same thing. So I think when we're looking at the pay budgets, obviously this is ultimately determined by what your organisation can afford. But the main thing that I would say you need to look at is prioritising that pay budget. Once you've agreed with management, with finance, what you've got, what's affordable, think about how you want to use that pay budget. To review it in relation to your strategic goals. So your reward strategy, for example, is it important that you invest in retaining critical roles? Are there certain roles that you know you need to be paying more for? Do you want to give more for people who are high performers or those who contribute most to your organisation? Do you maybe need to address some pay equity issues? I mean, this may have come about because, of course, we've seen a lot of very high pay awards when we in the last year or so because of the difficult recruitment market. So you may be recruiting external hires in at a higher level than people within the team are currently paid. You may well then have built up some pay equity issues in the team. And also think about how you want to distribute your pay between your low earners and your high earners. And whether you want to, instead of saying, well, we're giving everyone 3%, do you want to differentiate between, looking at things like compa ratio, so where somebody is on the pay band, because 3% to someone who's earning 60,000 is a different amount to someone who's earning 20,000. So when looking at that pay budget, I say that obviously you've got to decide what's affordable, but then think about how you're going to prioritise it. Then that sort of links into pay transparency, which I mentioned earlier. So it's always going to be difficult to have these conversations with employees when they're seeing such high costs at home and you can't give them a pay award that maybe they want. But what will help the conversation is if you can be transparent about how you've made the pay decision. Obviously, if you don't have any structures in place and pay is currently something that's done in a darkened room and nobody talks about, then you might have a bit of a journey to get to that point. But ultimately, the more transparent you can be with employees about why the budget is what it is, why Joe's been given 6% and Jane's been given 3%, then the more that they will at least feel that it's been a fair decision, even if it's not necessarily the increase that they were hoping for. I just wanted to touch briefly on variable pay, so bonuses, incentive schemes, and so on. It's important to also bring those into the mix, because if you do have a bonus scheme, for example, then when managers are having those pay conversations, it's important that they mention things like that as well, that they're talking about the total reward package. Because again, if you've had a really great year from a sales or a profit perspective, being able to pay out quite a high bonus, that's a useful thing to bring into the conversation if you're not able to give more than a 3 or 4% pay increase. Also, from an employer cost point of view, it's important that you regularly review your variable pay schemes and make sure that you're actually getting value for money from these. And so I would generally recommend that you review them once a year to make sure they still align with your business objectives and that they're still being effective. So, you know, for example, on your sales commission schemes, if your sales teams are absolutely raking it in sales commission, but you're not actually seeing the sales that you were expecting or sales of particular product lines that you wanted, you need to review how effective the structure of your sales commission scheme is. And also make sure that there's still clear line of sight for employees. And what I mean by that is that when you set objectives and goals and targets within a bonus scheme, that employees feel they can actually influence that, because they're not going to be motivated to perform higher or achieve certain objectives if they don't feel they can actually have any influence on those targets. So these kind of things are important to look at on a regular basis. And then finally, obviously, in addition to sort of, you know, base pay and variable pay, we also have other sort of tools in our kit band of compensation that might help with the current challenges. So, for example, from a recruitment point of view, I've personally seen an increase in sign-on bonuses. This is something that's actually quite common in the USA and not so common here in the UK, but definitely in recent times, with it being so difficult to attract talent and, you know, not necessarily either being able to afford or wanting to give really, you know, high pay levels to external recruits, sign-on bonuses are a tool that you can use to help there. But also, of course, discretionary payments to help with the cost of living. And as you have seen, lots of organisations advertising what they're doing here. I have had a few people ask me, you know, what sort of percentage of organisations are giving these. Actually, there's very little data that I can find around that. But I would say it's probably fewer than you think. And ultimately, it comes down to your organisation and what you want to do. So what can you afford? How does it sort of fit with your organisation values and purpose? You know, if you're an organisation that wants to demonstrate that, you know, you really do care about employees' cost of living and you can afford it, it is a really good thing to be doing, rather than, you know, trying to sort of address it through the pay budget. Now, I've included a couple of useful links on here you might want to refer to around, you know, why pay budgets aren't necessarily the same as inflation. And then the final thought I'll leave on this one is basically going back to the point I made earlier, is that I rather like, if you've seen Dan Pink's little YouTube videos, a sort of comic video thing. So it's a really good one to look up if you haven't seen it. He basically just describes sort of the motivational theories around pay. What he's basically saying is that beyond a fairly low level of financial reward, basically pay people enough to take the issue of money off the table, then there are other drivers that are more important and engaging and retaining employees in an organisation. So this goes back to my point. Make sure you've got your pay right, make sure you're paying at the right levels and you're dealing with the things I've just discussed. But then ultimately, if you also have, you're looking to how you can better engage and retain employees in the organisation, there are other drivers within reward that would be better used to try and address that. So the next thing I'm going to talk about then is benefits. So as I mentioned before, benefits, huge area of growth and change. And probably the biggest area of emphasis in the last couple of years, which also came out in the Aon Benefit Trends survey, is benefits that support health and well-being. Not surprising, we've just come out of a pandemic, but huge increase in emphasis on this. Now, this survey was done earlier this year, and I think if it was run again, we would see financial well-being having moved quite a lot up that chart. And I will talk about financial well-being in detail in a second. But I think it's still, with the cost of living crisis, benefits focusing on health and well-being is still a really important thing to be concentrating on. Very much correlates with cost of living. There's obviously a clear linkage between money struggles and mental and physical health. But also, benefits that support health and well-being can also help from a financial perspective. So, for example, if you're wanting to offer some kind of health support, like a health cash plan or private medical insurance, obviously that gives employees peace of mind that they can easily access medical facilities if they need to without having normal NHS waiting lists, for example. So that's one worry they don't have to think about, along with money worries. But also health cash plans can also help them financially, because on a health cash plan, you can usually claim reimbursements for things like dental or eye care or physiotherapy or other therapies. So these are things that otherwise the employee might be needing to pay for themselves. But through your health cash plan, then you can reimburse them for that cost. So that's one cost that you're taking away from them. as well as giving them that comfort around being able to access those services. Another thing that's become quite popular is wellbeing allowances or wellbeing reimbursement, where you're reimbursing the employees for an activity that they do that they pay for that's linked to something that helps their well-being. Which basically gives them the choice, because everyone's thing is different. You might, horse riding might be your thing, that's a thing that you love, that makes you really happy and chilled out and de-stress at the end of the day and forget your worries. So with a wellbeing allowance or reimbursement, you're supporting the employee's well-being, you're showing that you do care about their well-being, and also you are reimbursing them, so you are helping with the cost of doing the thing that they love that makes them feel a lot happier and helps with their own well-being. Employee assistance programs is something that I'm sure a lot of you already have in your organisation, and those also quite often offer financial well-being support, which we'll talk about in a second. But just from an organisation's cost perspective, something else that's changing a lot in this area is that you'll probably find some of your other benefits providers, like your risk benefit providers and your healthcare benefits providers, also now offer employee assistance programs as a free part of their package. So if you are paying for a separate EAP provider provision, then you might want to consider looking at what's also being offered by your existing benefits providers, because the organisation may be able to make savings there, because any savings that you make, you can help put in your business case to invest in other things to support employees' well-being and cost of living. So let's then delve in a little bit deeper into financial well-being. Now, this is a really big growth area within benefits, and again, a lot of new providers coming on the market here. But this is probably, in addition to health and well-being benefits, this is another really key area that you can look at adding to your portfolio or investing in to support employees in the cost of living crisis. So these broadly break down into three areas. So firstly, looking at long-term financial health. And here, of course, the biggest thing to look at is pension, is providing a pension scheme. I'm sure a lot of you already have one. If not all of you have a really, really good one. I think just a couple of thoughts on pension schemes. Organisations usually have these in place, but employees don't necessarily understand them or don't think about it very often. We've also got, we know that younger people don't necessarily engage so much in pension schemes. Retirement is years and years off. And also with the cost of living crisis, people are going to naturally want to prioritise short-term cash. So there is a risk people start opting out of pension schemes because they want that take-home pay today. So it's really important with pension to make sure that it's complemented by financial education, and that this is something that you'll probably find your pension provider already has. A lot of them have webinars that they provide. They may offer one-to-one support. That might be at additional cost, but it might be a free of charge product that they have. They might be willing to do a tailored webinar just for your employees. But it's just really important that employees really understand pension and why it's important to save for the long term. Because yes, we have a cost of living crisis now, but ultimately you also need to have enough money to be living on when you retire. Also, in terms of long-term financial health, there are other things you can do to encourage employees to think longer term around savings. Again, that's a difficult message when people are worrying about cash now, but ultimately, if employees are encouraged to save through things like workplace ISAs, for example, or just through a financial education program, then they've got that little bit in the bank for if the worst should happen. It's all very well trying to worry about day-to-day savings, but what if the boiler suddenly breaks down and you've got to find the money for that? So encouraging employees just to think about saving where they can. So the second area in terms of financial well-being products and things to focus on is giving employees that comfort that their family will be protected financially if the worst should happen. And this is generally where your risk benefits come into play. So these are things like life insurance, permanent health insurance, also sometimes known as income protection, personal accident insurance, and critical illness insurance. So not only then is that you're taking one worry away from employees when they're managing day-to-day costs, they know that if something were to happen to them, that their families would still have that money either as a lump sum or as an income. But also usually with group risk risk benefit products, you can get a better rate than the employee can if they were going to try and buy this themselves on the open market. So something like critical illness insurance, for example, you'll be able to get a much better rate around that. So even if it's something that you offer as part of maybe a flexible benefits package that the employee still needs to contribute towards, it will be at a much lower rate than it would be if they wanted to buy it themselves. And then the other area around sort of financial well-being where employers can help is around managing everyday finances. And it's quite a lot actually that an employer can do here. And this is really useful messaging to add in, when we're having those sort of conversations around pay budgets. So firstly, one of the products that's been around for a few years is early wage access and also salary finance. And there's a few providers on the market, like WageStream, for example, that can work with your payroll to offer this kind of product. It's quite a useful one to have if you have quite a lot of people on lower incomes in your organisation. I would say it needs to be part of a broader, ideally part of a broader financial wellbeing package and an education programme, because it's really useful in helping to deal with unexpected expenses and help people avoid taking out high interest loans. But ideally, you want to be encouraging people to save, like I said, because you want to encourage them to save for the future, so they have that little bit of money in the bank to deal with these unexpected things, so they don't need to access their wages early. So it ideally should be part of an overall package that rather than just a sort of one-off product that you provide. Salary sacrifice is absolutely something you should look to offer as an organisation. This is a win-win all round. A pension in particular, contributing to pension through salary sacrifice is by far and away the most tax efficient way of doing it. Employees get the tax and national insurance savings on that. Also, you'll get that on the cycle to work electric car schemes as well. And things like technology purchase and white goods, you'll get national insurance savings. Sorry.
The 20 hours it for,
so from the employee's perspective, it's important to obviously explain this clearly, because it can be a little tricky to understand that where you're getting the savings is through your tax and national insurance. But ultimately, employees can make a lot of savings in this area. And also the employer makes national insurance savings as well. So again, that's something that you can put into your pot to maybe reinvest in other areas of reward. There's something else you might want to consider is subsidising travel or lunch or catering options, particularly if you're trying to encourage people back into the office or you already have people working in the office on a regular basis. And also particularly if people are working in high-cost areas like London. I have a lot of friends, for example, who were saying, well, I'd really love to go back into the office, but it's costing me £20 a day to get into London. So anything that you can do there to subsidise travel costs, maybe through a subsidised travel card, for example, would be something else that you could do to support in terms of cost of living. And then finally, shopping discounts. This might be something that your organisation already has. It's quite a common and popular thing for organisations to offer. There's lots and lots of providers on the market for this. A lot of them are packaged up with other things as well. The one I just put up here is Reward Gateway. This is quite a popular provider. This one is actually the Reward Gateway for small businesses offering, which I quite like. This is for companies of 100 employees or fewer. And it's a package that gives employees shopping discounts or discounts on literally just about every high street and online shop, as well as a wellbeing hub, lots of useful information, guidance, employees on wellbeing, and also a recognition package. So you get sort of all of that packaged up together. It's for a fairly low cost for small businesses. The shopping discounts is also another one to investigate with your other benefit providers. It's something else that they are also starting to add, as well as employee assistance programs. So, for example, Bupa now offers discounts on wellbeing products as part of some of their standard packages. Some of the health cash plan providers also offer shopping discounts as one of their sort of free add-ons. So it's worth looking at your other benefit providers rather than necessarily investing in a separate provider for shopping discounts. But this is something that absolutely you should be communicating on a regular basis to employees that they have access to, because they could be getting 10, 15, 20% off their shopping bill, which is really going to help in the cost of living crisis, and often employees forget this even exists as part of their benefit package because it's not necessarily front of mind. So, I've mentioned that some of those products you would want to make sure that you also have education and support in place around that. And this is another area where there's been a lot happening in recent years, and a lot of providers have come onto the market. There's basically a few different areas to financial education and support, which I've broken down here. So financial education, this is basically where you are providing webinars or guidance packages and booklets on managing finance, managing your money. And you'll find that a lot of your benefits providers and your pension provider will probably have this kind of material available for free. It's not necessarily something that you need to pay for as an organisation, although there are specific financial education providers on the market. So Wealth at Work, Hargreaves Lansdown are some of them, some of the banks as well. And there are, of course, lots of free advice websites that you can signpost employees to, like the Money and Pension Service. Financial platforms, these are often app-based. They are often linked to open banking, so things like Nudge and Bipit are types of platforms that you'll find here. And what they do is that they have tools, calculators, and nudge notifications, and they're basically trying to encourage employees to really engage with their money and think about their money. So it can be quite a useful tool to sort of put as part of your overall financial wellbeing package. They are usually paid for services. In fact, say someone has to tell you they're free, there probably is some cost hidden in there some. Financial coaching is something that is becoming quite popular. And this is where there will be an external financial coaching company that comes in and does one-to-one sessions with employees, giving guidance and coaching around money. I mean, money is something that we in Britain don't like to talk about a great deal. So it's actually one of the big problems around the cost of living crisis and well-being, because people don't talk about it, they worry about it, but they never say anything, and they don't ask for help. So coaching can really help from this point of view, because then you have a qualified coach who will work through the money issues with the employee, but also understand what their money goals are and help them plan towards that. I recently saw a presentation from Octopus Money Coach, which is one of the providers in this market. And they were saying how they had, for example, somebody who had got specific retirement goals, got plans for funding children through university, but also now being thrown up in the air because their mortgage has now suddenly gone up a huge amount because of interest rates going up. So what the money coach did was help them through various options as to how they could still achieve all or most of their goals by managing the money in a different way. Important to know is this isn't regulated financial advice. So coaches are not regulated. They can't give regulated financial advice, and they can't sell products. Financial advice is the other area of financial support, although that is costs. So that's something that if you were going to provide as a service to employees, would be something you would have to fund, or you would signpost them towards someone, but then the employee would need to fund that. So the final thing that I was going to talk about then on this was communication and education. So I said right at the very beginning, this is a real passion of mine, that it is particularly important in this area of looking at compensation benefits and financial well-being and how they support employees in the cost of living crisis. So 3 things. Firstly, start at the top. Don't assume when you're having these conversations that senior managers understand reward, and in particular the impact of non-cash reward on engagement in the bottom line. So things like recognition schemes. If you're trying to get investment in a recognition program, is something that you'll need to sort of coach and educate some managers on, so that they understand the full area of total reward and what are going to be the best things to invest in that are going to see the best results in terms of supporting employees from the cost of living and addressing retention and recruitment issues. As HR professionals, you absolutely know the importance of engaging in education with line managers, but in particular at the moment, because they're going to need to explain pay decisions, for example. So make sure that they have the full understanding around why the pay decisions have been made the way they are, why the pay budget is what it is, so that they're empowered to have those conversations, because they can be quite difficult conversations at the moment. and make sure that the manager is able to then promote the total reward package, that when they're having those conversations, they know what else is in the package, whether it's bonus schemes or some of the things I've talked around with benefits and financial well-being. And if you are rolling out any kind of recognition scheme, obviously really important that line managers really live that culture of recognition. And then finally, from an employee engagement point of view, I would really recommend developing what I call sustained communications campaign. That doesn't mean you're bombarding everybody every 2 days with emails, but making sure that throughout the year, you are regularly communicating with employees, that it's not just something you do once a year at annual enrollment for benefits, for example, or when you launch a financial education program, that you have a communications campaign. You might want to do a bit of branding around this that's linked to your organisation's EVP, or the organisation's cultures and values. But ultimately what you're trying to do is make total reward and their compensation transparent, motivational, engage them in their total reward package, and regularly remind them on what you offer as an organisation and how it supports them, so that all those great things that I just talked about, they don't forget in 3 months' time. So thank you so much for listening to my croaky voice. I do apologise. Unfortunately, nothing I could do about it, but hopefully you found that useful.
Andrea, you sound like you absolutely need to rest that voice now after talking for 30 odd minutes. So thank you. Thank you for struggling through it with, that was really great. So I'm going to pass over to Graham and Sarah, because I know from Gateway HR, because I know that they had information as well that they wanted to share and share with us. So I'll pass over to you two guys.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you. Andrea, well done. Amazing. As a speaker and that, who struggles through his voice and 2 operations later, you did incredible. So well done with that. And what amazing insight, guidance and signposting. So loads and loads of tools. Obviously, as a performance coach and a trainer who works with business leaders and managers and does about 100+ sort of senior leadership coaching sessions a year, I want to share some insight in a couple of kind of human performance related things that I think might be of interest to you, but I don't want to swing straight away from the momentum of the HR world. So maybe if I finish with that. So I'd like to hand over to my colleague here, Sarah, who's just going to talk you through much better than I could, a couple of little things that we're doing here at Gateway. And then, of course, it would be fantastic if you've got any questions or anybody else to share with the whole group, obviously, stuff that you're doing as well. So before I kind of finish up, that would be fantastic. All right, so keep that in your mind. If you know of anything that you're doing or businesses around you are doing that is not mentioned by Andrea or not mentioned here, then please make sure we share that. Sarah, over to you.
So I think in terms of how we're tending to approach it, I think we looked at it as, I'm sure everyone can kind of relate, when you're from a HR perspective, sometimes you can find yourself in a really fine line where you're between the business and then you're between the employee. And sometimes that can be a really difficult balance, especially when we're looking at sort of organizational strategy, we're looking at long-term plans. And sometimes you might find that you can't do those sort of larger, bigger plans, or sometimes you have to be a bit more reactive. So what we've really tried to do is capture the essence of both of those elements and pull together what we've called a cost of living toolkit. And essentially what we've done is pull together loads of different types of documents and stuff that we would hope everyone would find useful, which range from checklists for how a HR professional can work closely with the business, look at how you can protect the business's finances. We know, especially when you report into board level and senior level teams, that they're conscious of the bottom line as well as the employees. So like we say, looking at that balance. So we wanted to make sure we were coming at it from both angles. So we pulled together checklists on how, as a HR professional, you can look at how you can support the business during challenging times. So not just the employee aspects, but then really taking that focus on what you can do to support the team and your employees. So you're really covering both of those bases. And I think a lot of the stuff that Andrea said, we've kind of touched on. It's all brilliant and really useful stuff that tends to fall within both of those areas. So similar to what you mentioned, running through, looking at what benefits you've already got, looking at what access you've already got, because we know that the cost of living crisis is affecting everyone hugely, and that does continue all the way up through businesses. So really it's looking at how you can bring that added value, not just necessarily at a cost in terms of a tangible one, but have you already got some providers that are offering free services that maybe you've not tapped into? So we've really tried to pull together some tools that hopefully prompt those thought processes, those conversations. And then especially with the when it comes to supporting employees, we've tried to go another layer deeper in terms of not just the financial support, so how to support those conversations. And I thought Andrea's point was brilliant about that starting from the top down, and we equally agree. So we drafted some tools that focus solely around mental health tools. So looking at when you're going to have conversations, how can you train your managers so they're comfortable having these sorts of conversations? And equally, what tools can you offer employees so that they can start to proactively reach out for help? Because I think you're absolutely right. As a culture here in this country, we do struggle to start those conversations around finances. I mean, anyone who's had any dealings internationally, I think I've done recruitment in America before, and it's the first question they ask. They're very comfortable discussing salary, very comfortable discussing benefits and the tangible aspect of that. And as soon as you come to sort of UK, we don't want to talk about it, we'll leave it to the back. So we've looked at kind of how we can train managers to be comfortable having those conversations. So prompting those conversations, how can you approach an individual if you're concerned, but equally what tools can we put out there sort of within organizations, and that HR professionals can share within organizations to get people comfortable with maybe coming forward themselves, so that you're not always having to prompt it. So yeah, we've tried to do a bit of a holistic approach, looking at all the different angles. So how can we support employers, how can we support employees, and like we say, especially with HR sometimes finding themselves in the middle of that, equally how you can look after yourself too. And I think that's something we all need to be reminded of sometimes, is that we're in between all of these really tricky balances, and it's not to say that any of this doesn't apply to us. So kind of checking in on one another and looking at how we can apply some of those tools to ourselves as well, making sure that we're being mindful. So yeah, we kind of wanted to, I think it was really make sure that information is readily available and accessible. So checklists, letters, things that are really easy that you can adapt.
How do you access ours?
So ours is going to be available on a HR hub. So it's not live yet, but we're looking to launch our new HR hub, which is when it will be live and accessible. So we can always share information after for anyone that's interested, and how you can get access. There'll be
the expected date. Do we know?
We don't know the expected date. I think it's early next year. I'm not sure on the final date. I have to double check.
January early, or
yeah, hopefully. I'll have to double check.
We'll try and get that as fast as, but very, very early.
I was going to say, if you can share it with me, then we can put it onto the huddle, so onto the Facebook group, so everybody knows about it and can access it if they want to.
That would be amazing.
Just
we'll definitely share
to get the ball rolling on that. Can we have just a period here? Is anybody, obviously, and everybody attending, it's great to see so many people, kind of want to share any specific things? I don't know whether you've got one, I'd put you on the spot there, but just as well, any specific ideas or stuff that they've heard that they know has been going on that's, a real positive contributor to easing potentially the strain on people through the finances at the current state. Does anybody want to share anything?
Feel
yes,
free to.
Julie, please. Yeah. We can't hear you, Jane. I don't know why. You've not got your thing on. I don't know whether it's your headset or not. I'm not sure, just to let you know. We want to hear too. No, might be worth plucking the headset.
Let's pop it in the chat, Jane. Pop it in the chat box if.
Yeah, it'd be lovely to hear that. Really,
well,
really.
While Jane's doing that, I can share something that one of my clients is doing, which I think is really nice. They are, when people are on site, and then they are a big company, so I know. Well, I was going to say, I don't know whether it's easier or more difficult if you're a big company, but when people are on site working, because obviously lots of people are working remotely, but when they're on site, they will they organise their lunch, so they have subsidised lunches, and it just, and I think for some people it just means that they can have like a proper hot meal every day if they're on site in the office, or a couple of days a week. So whenever you are, I mean, they are a restaurant chain, I have to say, but it's not just their food. So because they're a fast food chain, and lots of people wouldn't want to eat fast food every day, but they are subsidizing lunches, which I think is, I think is a great thing.
Fantastic. Yeah, Sarah.
Yeah, I think Emily, similar to what you said, I saw a recent post, and I think it's really interesting, like you say, looking at how that can be accessible for maybe some smaller organisations. And I think I saw a really brilliant example that was in the same vein, where it was a really small company actually, but what they did is they had a cupboard in the kitchen and they stocked it with cup of soups, soup noodles, things like that, the sort of 70p packets. And it was, take what you need to have your lunch while you're here. It will be topped up when it's empty, but we want that to be one less meal that you're worried about, if that's something. So I think you're absolutely right. I think that's a really good suggestion
nice
that a
way
lot
of
of people are doing. And I think it's nice, I think as well, the phrasing I saw from an employer that was doing something similar, it wasn't a huge cost for them to do, but equally, it was nice that it wasn't an obvious thing. So if anyone went and took one, there wasn't the embarrassment that I'm taking one of these and I think people are going to think I'm struggling for whatever reason. It was a really nice open thing. So I think it's a really brilliant point, and similar to something Andrea pointed out as well. There's another thing I've seen which is similar to the pensions. I know that recent research has shown that young people are withdrawing from pensions at the minute because they feel like it's not a priority. So definitely reaching out to those pension providers is an example I've seen, and seeing if they'll offer webinars, if they'll come in and do sort of talks just to run through just even what is a pension, because I think sometimes it's the sort of thing that when we've got new generations entering the workplace, sometimes it is that knowledge piece behind it and kind of removing the fear, because I think I'm me personally speaking from experience, I think you get to sort of 18, 19, you think I've got to be an adult now and I'm not even sure what half of this means, because I wasn't taught what a mortgage is. I wasn't taught what a mortgage is. I wasn't taught what a pension is. We didn't really have that education. So I think being mindful that, no matter what age you are, sometimes you might experience going through a mortgage process for the first time 40, 50. So I think definitely speaking to providers and seeing what education pieces are out there that they're willing to do, because no matter what your team's age, it's definitely always the education that can sometimes help remove the fear.
Yeah, definitely.
Brilliant.
So Jane has said, so they have reviewed their expenses policy for those that travel regularly. So they provide a preloaded, card instead of expecting people to pay out for expenses, which I think is a great idea.
Brilliant.
And looking at a Christmas, sorry, my screen keeps jumping. Looking at Christmas savings. Savings plan for next year so that people can save monthly to help with Christmas. Yeah, that's a great idea. And Caroline shared that she's aware of their Belgium office doing an EAP program for 25 per person per employee. So, and the government also has a voucher scheme to help save on lower income workplace ISAs. Yeah, do you know, I didn't even know about workplace ISAs. I know that sounds incredibly uneducated. So I think that was a good learning for me. And Wendy has shared on the food aspects, check out if you have a local community fridge. Actually, in Harborough, I believe there's a local community fridge in the Eco Village. I don't know whether there's one anywhere else. And I know obviously lots of people aren't based in Market Harborough. But that's a great idea to post about it on notice boards. And like Wendy says, people even sometimes need educating on what a household budget is. Yeah, because I mean, if quite often they don't do financial management in schools. And Jane has also shared that Medicash is a superb cash plan. If people don't know Medicash, they introduced it in July and probably said the best benefits scheme they've introduced in a long time. It offers great high street discounts and reimbursements of medical costs. Blimey, we've got loads of things on here. And EAP also has a great counselling session, £25 per person, and Reward Gateway use BSHF, I don't know what that is, sorry, and charge for it, so it's cheaper to go direct for the system.
The BSHF is one of the health cash grant providers.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think the point is it's cheaper to go to them directly necessarily than going through one of these big platform providers like Recruitment.
Brilliant. Great. I mean, they're great ideas, guys. Is anybody got anything else that they want to share?
Really good, really good. No, appreciate that. And I'm sure that's been a great insight to everybody. If I may just offer some thoughts as a bit of and again, they'll keep coming in. Do we share those, by the way, Eloise, on the chat?
You can see them all now. They will be recorded. So what I can do
Brilliant.
is pull them all together
That'd
and
be
share
great.
them afterwards. Yeah,
I think that's really good. So that would be helpful. Thank you. To put you on the spot to do that.
yeah, no,
That's
I
good.
can do that. Not a problem.
I was kind of listening to Andrea and thinking about the link actually to sort of my performance coaching world. And I wanted to share, why wouldn't I, 3.5 decades of a little bit of experience of collecting stuff, working with people, organizations and performance. And I feel there's 4 kind of fundamental components that are ever present. And I'm not saying there's more a definitive list, but there are absolutely 4 that are ever present. So I'll keep it simple. But I'm going to talk about the impact that I believe this current situation. And by the way, we're talking current. We got an expectation of this for 2 years, right? We got, we're talking about, the government and the CIPD are talking about the doubling of the unemployment figures by 2024. So this isn't going away. So we need to really get on top of this as we are doing. And it's great that you host this. So here they are. The first one is talent. Because I want to talk about the impact that it'll have on talent. The reality of impact on talent, all right, is the decisions that organizations will be making on training and on upskilling and the rest of it. This doesn't have to be expensive, because we should remember that we could do this internally. It's not just about going on a course. Every organization will have tremendous amount of talent and experience and expertise and wisdom within their organizations. Now, people leave businesses all the time. That's just life. That's the way it is. But the unforgivable thing is when organizations allow those people to take their wisdom with them. Mentoring schemes, internal mentoring schemes, all right? Share the information, share the knowledge. You can continue to upskill internally at almost a free cost, because people are there without sending people on courses. I don't want to cut my own throat here in terms of training, but it's the reality that people can't afford that. Okay, so there's one thing. So talent, all right, it is ever critical. So find ways to continue to develop your talent. I'm going to come back to the last one, because strategy. You're absolutely right to say it and repeat it, Andrea, because nobody stumbles across greatness here. And if we're going to try and produce greatness, all right, in the world of this current climate and the financial climate that we face, we have to have a strategy for it. Right? We're not just going to show blind and fumble our way through this. So if we've not got a strategy, I think we need to sit down with business leaders now and get yourself a strategy, because success will happen because you have a strategy. The third one, of course, is I want to put on there, and that is motivation. And there's some really interesting links. I'm glad you picked out Dan Pink's Drive, of course, 2011, Canadian author, brilliant book, read it twice, front to back, absolutely amazing. Now, the thing about motivation, it's important right now, because motivation will be affected in so many ways. So business leaders, managers, HR professionals, make sure we understand the reality of motivation, because it's fundamental to performance. There's two areas of that. The first one is intrinsic motivation, and we can remind you of simple things like Abraham Maslow. If you want a modern version, look at the Barrett model. And I'm just flinging through this because I want to do it before we finish. But Abraham Maslow, they talk about at the most fundamental level, people are intrinsically motivated on a survival level. That means, enough. But enough is changing all of a sudden. What is enough is fundamentally changing. Why? 2 things, because the demand on parents now is getting greater with technology and expectation of the kids and the communities around them. And 2, because of the reduce of the disposable income. So the survival element is massive. The second tier, and I'm not going to talk past that today, but that is literally what we call security. So when we're talking about fun, a lot of it is the uncertainty of the security. So if we can, and I'm not saying you can, but part of the strategy where possible, even to communicate simple levels of security could be fundamentally life-changing for some of your people. So if that's possible, think about security. Now, extrinsically, what can we do? That's about you as a leader. That's about you as a HR professional, as a manager. What can I do to extrinsically support the motivation? And you're absolutely right what you said there. That is about creating an environment that is supportive. that provides the support, because somebody that feels like they're in this together, I'm not on my own here, that sense of belonging, all right? So if we can do that, and we're going to show that we're going to do all these things, and we're going to signpost people, we're going to provide for you, that is a way of providing extrinsic motivation also. The last one I want to talk about, of course, of my things, the 4 is resilience. But that's going to be massively affected for certain. Now, I want to break resilience down into 4 areas for you. The first one, of course, is physical. People forget to do this. When we talk about physical, we're talking about demand. Look at the demand now on us as individuals. And by the way, we're not just talking about work, because people bring themselves to work. Human beings, mothers, fathers, grandparents, partners, they have huge responsibilities. So the physical demand is getting greater and greater. So what can we do? I'll come to this in a minute. I'll direct you to a little model to think about. The second one, of course, is mental resilience. I've just said again there, this isn't just about what's happening at work. I have this all the time in my coaching sessions with senior leaders, but how far should I go to worry about what's happening in people's personal life? And my answer is simple. If it was my bottom line, I would go as far as I possibly could. All right, there's a simple phrase, there's a lovely statement. I want you to think about this. There's a guy called Graham Henry, who's one of the most influential senior management contributors to the All Blacks. All right, who said it's simple when he talks about success: look after the people and the score will take care of itself. And I just think that's such a good quote to think about right now moving forward. Look after the people, the score will take care of itself. So my question to you would be to say, as a performance coach, you ask questions to get you to think, is to say, what does looking after your people mean right now? Because you want them to look after the score for you. So there's that one there. The third one, of course, is emotional. What's the single biggest contributor to emotional resilience? Relationships. This is a time to communicate in the most empathetic, joined up, consistent, regular way. Be clear, be concise, be empathetic, all these things, right? I'm just throwing them out, and I can see people thinking about it. So emotional, relationships, working relationships. And the last one, of course, is behavioral. The signs are there for you. What does it mean in terms of behavioral resilience? What's the biggest single impact? Stress. Stress is the thing, and I bothered myself about 15, 20 years ago, of course, to write 104 pages for a level 5 diploma on this subject. So I would consider myself a reasonable expert, and I work in the world of stress with 30 years in fire and rescue. I work with the military, work with all sorts of organisations, and of course, my professional sporting world too. We do know that the impact on this in terms of the employer is growing and growing and growing, just out of control. We're talking about 27 billion pounds as short as 2017 when Theresa May commissioned the Stevenson Farmer report. We're already in the 40 and 50 billions. So we're talking about doubling just 5 years. So this is growing, and we haven't even got the 21, 22 figures in yet with the fallout of COVID. So it's huge. A couple of areas to focus on. I'm going to really try and be quick, wrap this up. Think about the stress management standards. That will guide you to the areas of focus. These are: 1, demand. How can I reduce the demand on the people? Is there any way, just have a two-way conversation, any way at all, even the smallest little thing? The second one, of course, is what we call control. How much control does the person have in terms of what's happening to them or not? How can I change that round by giving them options? Third one is relationships. How good and effective are the working relationships? Fourth one, of course, is support. Are we giving them any support? How much support have we given them? Can we give people more support? And likewise for yourself as a business, what support do you need as a business? As Sarah quite rightly said, excuse me, we're not just talking about the employers, we're talking about the employers as well. And the fourth and fifth are change and role. So have a little look at those. Here's my last point. Will I get it in? No, a bit late. Last point I want you to think about. I was doing some work recently with some emergency services, and I was delivering on an acronym called VUCA. And I don't know whether anybody's heard about it, or I'm going to remind you, going back in your maybe level 5 and level 7 days. I don't know. So this is an acronym that was first came to its fore in the late 1980s. I think 1990, and the demise, ironically, of Russia or the USSR, where the American War College presented to the sort of the Global Security Council, and they described the current climate or the future climate for security to work in was what we called VUCA. That's volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And I think that perfectly describes the current or the future financial climate too. So I would guide people, thank you, Jane. So I would guide people, all right, to literally have a little look at that and get their managers and leaders and businesses to understand it, because there's some fantastic stuff. How do we fight volatility? How do we guide volatility or reduce it? We get managers to lead, all right, with a vision. By creating a compelling vision, all right, helps people to focus their energy and efforts in a particular area. That's the first one. No problem. Thanks, Wendy. Literally, volatility, sorry, we've got vision, uncertainty with understanding. You'll see all this, I'll let you look at it yourself. Complexity with clarity, and of course, ambiguity with agility. I hope that's something else to think about on a kind of professional sense from somebody that works with businesses and leadership teams all over the country at every level. So Eloise, amazing. In fact, what a fantastic subject area. We could do this for 2 hours, couldn't we?
I was going to say we could talk all day, couldn't we? And that's the problem. So thank you so much, Andrea, for your
brilliant,
your great presentation, and for struggling on with your voice. It was really interesting. Sarah and Graham, thank you so much for your input as well, and everybody for your input, because yeah, the business side always fascinates me, Graham, and I could listen to your stories and your information for hours. But
thanks for inviting me.
I was going to say, if there's anything in addition you want to share that you haven't managed to get through, if you want to pass it to me, then I can distribute it to everybody that's been on here. Definitely about the hub, Sarah, but also any other information that you had, Graham, and I'll share across all the slides, etc. But thank you everybody for contributing and being part of the huddle. I'll share the chat notes as well. Obviously, I'll pull those together so they're more relevant. Now, the next HR Huddle won't be until January. So the next meeting is scheduled for the 25th of January. I will be getting the invite out shortly. And we will also be doing an employee law update as well early in the new year. So thank you, everybody, so much for your contribution, and I will have a lovely Christmas. Seems awful to say that.
Merry Christmas.
For Christmas, and I will speak to you all soon.
Been a pleasure. Take care of yourself.
Take care.